All right. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be live here today to talk to you about effective pro-life strategy and a theory of change to end the killing. When lives are on the line, just doing any kind of pro-life activism isn't good enough. We need smart and effective pro-life activism. So our goal here is to talk today about how we need to work backwards from the goal with proactive, vision-driven, strategic thinking to make the most effective use of our limited time and resources to go through our theory of change to make abortion unthinkable and end the killing. I want to start with what was called the Camp Fire, a wildfire that erupted in November 2018, about 90 miles north of Sacramento, California. By evening, this fast-moving fire had charred around 18,000 acres, and it remained 0% contained. The Camp Fire was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California's history. Nearly 19,000 structures were destroyed in a matter of weeks. Second place was a wildfire in 2003 with just under 3,000 structures. Nearly 90 people died during this wildfire. Now, on the first day of the fire, hot spots and a plume of smoke was visible from space. On November 18th, a meteorologist posted to Twitter, "If you thought it was just a bit hazy this afternoon, we have a California fire smoke plume moving through." He was in New Jersey. It took 17 days to completely contain this fire and a wide variety of methods and heroic efforts and smart actions and effective strategies. In Canada, we are facing a wildfire of sorts with the culture of death right now. Right? Nearly 300 children are killed by abortion every day in Canada. And since abortion was legalized in 1969, over 4 million innocent human beings have lost their lives due to abortion. The shockwaves ripple throughout our culture, and Canada has no laws protecting preborn children. And while many Canadians aren't comfortable with late-term abortion or abortion in certain situations, most Canadians are comfortable with abortion at least some point during pregnancy. Our society largely accepts this reality. How can we turn this around? How do we fight a wildfire? Well, you can't just walk up to it with a water gun, that's for sure. We need serious and effective, well thought out strategies and tactics that will actually reach everyone, that will actually put the fire out. Doing something isn't enough. We need to figure out what is necessary to solve a problem this big. We need a plan that will actually end the killing. So I want to talk today about effective strategy. And first, I'm going to go through a few principles that guide our pro-life educational efforts at CCBR in terms of staying effective. First, I will turn to the Emperor's New Groove.
Well, imagine Dad had to kiss a llama. Yeah, like that would ever happen. It could. No.
Good night.
First point is that Tipo and Chaka here, they get stuck in an infinite loop because they just state conclusions at each other. And that's not the kind of conversation that we want to have around abortion. The first point of effectiveness is that we need to bring clear reasons and compelling evidence to all of our pro-life educational efforts. So that's apologetics, the clear reasons, and compelling evidence, the visual, photographic evidence of the injustice of abortion. So this is a photo from me. I guess I took the photo. This is a photo from my pro-life club in university back in 2009, the U of T Students for Life. And at that time, some of the outreach that we engaged in on the streets was like this. We're there holding signs with slogans, right? So signs that say things like, abortion kills children, or adoption is the loving option, right? Now, are these statements true? Well, yes, but the problem with this kind of effort, and the problem that we realized as a club, is that these state our conclusions, right, that abortion kills children, but they don't give any reasons for how we've come to that conclusion, or why it's correct, or why anybody else should come to that conclusion. Does it provide any evidence to support the claim, or to change someone's mind, to convince them to agree with us? Right? So it's important that we move away from educational efforts that don't have clear reasons and compelling evidence, to make sure that when we are educating the public, we bring the apologetics and the abortion victim photography with us. This is our Toronto team running Choice Chain by George Brown College a few years later. And notice how we're bringing the clear reasons in conversation. My friends Paul, Wilma, and Michelle are in dialogue with others, putting our apologetics to use, making the case for human rights for all human beings, and that human rights should start when we know from science a human being starts at fertilization. And the photos of a preborn child before and after abortion, the evidence is visible to those in conversation and anyone else walking by. Or think for a second about a pro-life billboard that you might have seen in your town or on social media. In particular, from the educational arm, right? Like a pro-life billboard that aims to make people pro-life, to change what people think. And what message did it have, right? I've seen many pro-life billboards that don't always have clear reasons or compelling evidence. Take a look instead at the kind of billboards that we've designed for the Abortion Awareness Project that runs on campus. Notice the apologetics and the AVP, right? If we have a large sign, that's what we need to communicate: the clear reasons and compelling evidence why abortion is a human rights violation and why other people should change their minds to agree with us. So for more on the importance of abortion victim photography, we've got a book, Seen as Believing. For more on apologetics and the arguments in conversation, we have Stuck. You can find these resources on the website, but those are the first two components: the abortion victim photography, the compelling evidence, and the apologetics, the human rights apologetics, the clear reasons. Now, for a second principle, I want to go to a conversation that I had at Ryerson several years back. In this conversation, I was talking to this student for about 45 minutes, and using human rights apologetics, I was able to change his mind on abortion. I was able to provide those clear reasons in conversation, and he entered pro-choice, he left pro-life. We have to ask, not only are we effective in the conversation that we're in, but are we efficient, right? Is this an efficient way to reach people, right? I was there with a clipboard, and I spent 45 minutes just talking to this one student, right? How many people could I have reached in those 45 minutes with more engaging and visual educational tools, right? Would anybody passing by have any idea what we're talking about, right? In that 45 minutes, I was able to change the mind of one student, right? But being able to change one person's mind is not good enough. We need to be efficient. We need to be able to reach everyone with our pro-life educational efforts. So take, for example, compare that to Choice Chain, right? This is at the University of Toronto. In the span of just a few minutes, look at how many, like hundreds of people are walking by. And we had about 8 signs open on both sides of the road and a little down the street, right? People who don't stop to talk still could grab a pamphlet or see the compelling evidence. And look at the dialogue. We had a team of about 8 here today, and most people are in conversation here. But you see, even while they're in conversation, other people walking by are still going to see that compelling evidence. They're still going to see the abortion victim photography, right? When we engage in visible activism, it attracts attention. It makes our compelling evidence and our clear reasons visible to large numbers of people, right? We get groups come into conversations, right? We can't be complacent with just reaching some people. We need strategies that are going to actually reach everyone, right? We can't just go one person at a time. We need to make sure that our efforts are efficient. I want to quickly go through a couple other principles. I think it's important that we are proactive in our efforts, that we're the ones setting the agenda. And we'll get into this in the second half of the live stream in more detail, what a proactive strategy looks like. But when we bring clear reasons and compelling evidence in Toronto in an efficient way that reaches everyone, we set the agenda, right? We're driven by a vision of making abortion unthinkable for an entire community, reaching everyone with AVP and apologetics, and it puts us in charge of the conversation. We have a plan and we can stick to it. Oftentimes, pro-life efforts are, unfortunately, I should say human efforts. Oftentimes, as human beings, we react to what's going on around us. We're reactive, right? So a pro-choice government does something and we think, well, we need a strategy to respond. How do we respond to this, right? Or a pro-choice student union does something. Well, how do we respond to this? We can't be reactive. We need to be proactive. When we know what needs to be done, we stick to our plan and we set the terms of the agenda. So I often think of Ryerson, where you have one of the most vocally pro-choice student unions in the country, which has prevented pro-life clubs from getting official club status on the campus in downtown Toronto for a couple decades now. And I showed you that photo of clipboarding at Ryerson from 2015. But in 2016, we started doing regular choice chain at Ryerson, bringing engaging, regular, visual abortion victim photography and human rights messaging to the campus. And I think of it through this image. For those of you who've done activism with Toronto Against Abortion, you'll know we often use a cart and clamps to help transport our signs around, just to make it easier, especially when we started off, walking them around on transit downtown to go to different locations and that sort of thing. The cart and the clamps are kind of a signature of Toronto activism. And these student unions, the Ryerson Students Union and the part-time Students Union at Ryerson, vocally pro-choice, they do everything they can to suppress pro-life speech. They didn't know what to do with us because they couldn't stop us from getting the message out, because we were setting the agenda. We wouldn't go to ask for their permission. We went to do what we knew needed to be done, to bring the human rights message and abortion victim photography to everyone. And then rather than us reacting to them, we saw them start reacting to us. I think of this image of a cart and a dolly, because they started copying us even down to their tools and equipment, right? We were setting the agenda. They're chasing after us. We show up when we want to show up. They come chasing after us with signs they've made to try and block ours, the same size, the same kind of clamps. They are following us when we lead. When we figure out what needs to be done and we are proactive in doing it, we can set the agenda rather than constantly responding to the other side. They can start responding to us. That's a good sign that we're being effective. Now, a couple of the quick points. It's important to stay focused to avoid idea bundling, right? If we're blending a number of moral issues together in our campaign, we have to ask, is it helping or hurting us to win converts? There's a reason why we focus and specialize on preborn human rights, to take one problem at a time, right? If we try to tackle all of the problems in the culture war all at once, that is not very effective. Now, there's a difference between activism and analysis. I think it's important to understand what's going on across multiple issues in the broader culture war. But when we go out to engage the public, we pick one issue at a time in order to reach people effectively, which is why we keep it focused on abortion and preborn human rights. And lastly, we need to be asking ourselves, who is our target audience? And are we reaching them? Right? Too often, when we just look around and ask, okay, what can we do? The things that we pick are not always the most effective way of reaching our target audience, right? When we have, for example, pro-life events that people elect to come to, most of our target audience won't show up, whether that's a debate on campus or it could even be social media efforts if we're not thinking carefully about how to reach people who don't already agree with us, right? Like the goal of pro-life efforts isn't to gather a bunch of people who agree with us. Those are the people we want to reach. And also our target audience is not necessarily the most entrenched people on the other sides, right? It's not the most dedicated pro-choice activists. Our main target audience is what we call the mushy middle, the average Canadian who hasn't necessarily thought through what they believe about abortion in any great detail, who might be pro-choice by default because they haven't given it much thought. They've never been challenged by clear reasons or compelling evidence, right? The vast majority of Canadians are somewhere in the middle, and we need to make sure that we are bringing the truth to them. We can't wait for them to come to us. We have to make sure that we're out there and reaching our target audience in an effective way. Okay, so these are a few principles that we keep in mind in terms of effective pro-life strategy. But more important than that is how we go about achieving our vision of an abortion-free Canada, of making abortion unthinkable in our communities. Too often, again, human efforts, right? So this is true of our pro-life efforts because it's just true of human beings in general. Too often our efforts have what I would call a theory of action, picking this up from the late, great internet activist Aaron Swartz. He calls this a theory of action, where we look around and we ask, okay, what can I do? Right? What actions can I take right now to accomplish my goals? You know, you can write your MP, write a blog post, go on social media, march, hold a sign, hand out some pamphlets, hold a conference, host a speaker, put some posters or ads up. Right now, some of these actions might even reach people and change their minds or even save lives. Some might be more effective than others. But we can't just do stuff and hope that it will end the killing. A theory of action asks, what can I do? And looks for that first step to move forward towards our goal. But none of these scattered actions will fundamentally change things. Rather, now, some people might say, well, okay, well, that's because we're outnumbered. It's going to take some time, or it's not going to happen overnight. You know, we have to keep at it. There's only so much we can do. No amount of squirting a water gun will put out a wildfire. No amount of spitting in an ocean will bring about a sea change. We don't need a better theory of action. A theory of action isn't enough. What we need is a theory of change. Whereas a theory of action works forwards towards the goal and asks, what can I do? A theory of change works backwards from the goal, asking, what must be done so that our vision will be achieved? What are the prerequisites for achieving the goal? What conditions are necessary in order to bring about our goal, in order to bring about the vision? And the theory of change works backwards in concrete steps in order to figure out what actions we need to take along a path that will help us to achieve our vision. So a theory of action identifies a step one in the hopes that it'll take us on a path to our goal. Here I think of the famous internet meme. Step one, collect underpants, or phase 1, I should say. And phase 2, not really sure, but phase 3 is definitely profit. Right? We have to make sure that our strategies in life, but especially our pro-life strategies when lives are on the line, that they don't resemble a theory of action, that we don't just do stuff or look around at what actions we can take and hope that they will reach our goal. Even if we think carefully about, well, is this an effective action? If our starting point is where we're at now, and we don't have a clear path to the goal, if we haven't worked backwards to figure out what's necessary to get there, it's not enough to just think, is this action effectively? You have to think of it in the context of the vision, in the context of the goal. Right? We don't want to move forwards with in our strategic thinking with a theory of action. Rather, we need to be able to work backwards with a theory of change, right? To ask, what can I do? That's the wrong question. We're not there yet. That shouldn't be our starting point. Our starting point is, what must be done? And what needs to happen in order for our vision to be achieved? And what needs to happen in order for that to be achieved? And what needs to happen in order for that to be achieved? We work backwards and identify the necessary steps until we get all the way back to actions that we need to take on a path to get there. That's a theory of change. So I find it helpful to think about it this way, right? Imagine you are trying to build a wardrobe, and picture like, some kind of IKEA piece of furniture. There's some assembly required here. Yet when you open the box, you find there are no instructions. Okay? No problem. I'm sure we can figure this out. So you set aside some time, you gather some tools, you enlist a helper, and you get started.
You soon find out that there are a lot of pieces in this box, and it's hard to know which ones go where. You start with the pieces that seem easiest to fit together. But then what do? You don't make a lot of progress. Your wardrobe isn't turning out to be quite what you imagined, and you're wasting a lot of time and energy. Frustrated, you take a step back and consider your work. You think, my plan isn't working. I know what I want to build, and I've gathered the time, tools, and help to get this done, but I don't know how the pieces fit together. What if I could imagine the finished wardrobe in front of me and somehow take it apart piece by piece? By working backwards, I could see how my box of pieces fits together. So you try it. First, you see that there are 3 main parts: doors, drawers, and a cabinet. If you have these 3 pieces built, you can make the wardrobe. Now that you've separated the doors and drawers from the cabinet, you see that the cabinet has 2 parts, the top and the bottom. If those 2 parts aren't put together correctly, then the doors and drawers won't fit. Now that we have each part separated, we can see the individual pieces that each is made of. If you are missing any of these pieces, then you won't be able to complete the wardrobe. By the time you've finished working backwards, deconstructing the wardrobe, you've created a diagram of all the essential pieces at multiple stages that are needed to build the wardrobe. With this theory in hand, you can start your work of putting it together.
Right, so this is a theory of change, working backwards from the goal. And I had the same experience with a piece of furniture a couple of years back after a move. It was a desk that used to belong to one of my siblings and had been disassembled and has been in storage for a while. And there were no instructions. And when the first time I tried to assemble it, I wasn't even sure if I had all the pieces with me. And I found some other pieces in the storage unit. I started trying to put them together, and I couldn't get it to work. And it wasn't until I took this kind of theory of change approach, started working backwards, and I was able to envision what the top half of it looked like. And okay, working backwards, what pieces are necessary for this? I realized that on the bottom half, when I was trying to build up with the kind of theory of action, the first 2 pieces I assembled were actually attached in the wrong place. I started out on the wrong foot, And that's why it didn't work. It wasn't until I was working backwards from the goal, breaking it down into the necessary steps, that I was able to figure out how to put it back together, right? That's theory of change kind of thinking. And this is necessary in order to solve big and complex problems, like putting out a wildfire, for example, or take something like COVID-19, right? Regardless of what you think about everything that's going on right now, a pandemic is not the kind of problem that you can solve with the theory of action, right? You can't just chase down sick people and try and treat them. It's not going to work. You can't just look around and ask, okay, what can we do right now? You have to be able to work backwards from the goal, right? It's like, okay, well, how do we stop this thing? We need some kind of a cure or vaccine. Okay, well, how do we get that? Okay, that's going to take some time. How do we get time? And you work backwards from the goal, and this is how the public health measures get developed. Working backwards from the goal to think, okay, how do we buy more time? How do we stop hospitals from getting overloaded? How do we protect the vulnerable? Right, working backwards from the goal. And the thing is, with the theory of change, working backwards from the goal, you can also see if the plan is actually working, because there's a path. You're saying, well, here's the goal, and this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, working backwards. So we're going to take these actions and it should take us there. But then you can measure and see if it's actually working, right? You've got a path mapped out. Are you actually on that path, right? So you see a lot of that going on over the last several months, where different countries, different regions have taken different approaches. They've had different models in place, right? A different theory of change. And then there's testing along the way to see, okay, is this working? How is one model working better than the other, right? When we work backwards from the goal, we figure out what needs to be done, and we can test and figure out along the way if we're actually right or if we're misguided, if we're wrong. So we need this kind of thinking in order to solve big, complex problems. And that's what we're facing with the abortion issue, right? We need to have a sort of vision zero for the abortion rate. So Vision Zero is a project for eliminating pedestrian deaths, right? Anytime there's I should say deaths from pedestrian or motor vehicle accidents, right? So anytime there's a death, it's seen as a design problem with this Vision Zero thinking. The city of Toronto is implementing Vision Zero strategies, and other cities across the world have started to do this over the last several years. And it's working backwards from the goal. We can't tolerate deaths from these accidents. We need to get as close to zero as we can. Zero should be our goal. That's our vision. What do we need to do to get there? And it works backwards. And every time they see an accident, okay, well, how could we redesign, from an urban planning perspective, the streets or the speed limits, or the time in between a red light and a green light? How can we what needs to be done in order to save more lives, right? Aiming towards that zero. And when we're facing the complex problem of a widespread culture of death, when we're facing that kind of wildfire, we need vision-driven thinking that works backwards from the goal, that Vision Zero of bringing the abortion rate to zero in Canada. That's our goal that needs to drive our thinking. Now, when we get to a pro-life theory of change, it's important to distinguish between different and complementary arms within the pro-life movement, right? So we have the pastoral arm, which provides support to women. The mission here, the part of bringing the abortion rate towards zero, is seeking to make abortion irrelevant, right? By helping people who feel like they have no other choice. We have the political arm, which seeks to change the law with the goal of making abortion illegal, right? Of upholding human rights for all human beings in the law. And then we have the prophetic or the educational arm, where CCBR is focused, which seeks to educate the public in order to make abortion unthinkable. Right now, all of these efforts are important. If we're going to bring the abortion rate to zero, these efforts complement each other, and these different complementary missions are all necessary things that need to happen, right? We need legal protection. we need practical support, and we need to change the culture to make abortion unthinkable if we're going to achieve our vision to end the killing in Canada. CCBR's focus in particular is on the educational arm because there's a particular importance to educational efforts, right? People won't accept help from a crisis pregnancy center through a difficult pregnancy if an abortion clinic is going to help them out of a difficult pregnancy unless they see something wrong with abortion. Or people won't support politicians or laws that will uphold human rights for all human beings from the start of human life unless we can change their minds on the abortion issue. So the educational arm has a special role to change hearts and minds, to make abortion unthinkable. That's important for the overall success of the pro-life movement. But I find it's helpful for a second to turn to the political arm for what I think is a great and simple example of a pro-life theory of change. If you look at the organization right now in the political arm, seeking to pass pro-life legislation, right, to make abortion illegal, they don't approach their mission with a theory of action perspective, right? Right now doesn't start out thinking, okay, what kind of political stuff can we do, right? Pro-life politics is important. Let's go find the political things that we can do. They don't start by looking around and saying, what can we do? Rather, you can see in their strategy, they're asking what needs to be done in order to achieve the vision, right? Well, if we're going to make abortion illegal, we need to pass pro-life legislation. If we're going to pass pro-life legislation, we need to elect a pro-life majority. If we're going to elect a pro-life majority, we need to be able to nominate pro-life candidates. And if we're going to be able to nominate pro-life candidates, we need pro-life volunteers to be working to get out the vote, to support candidates, to get engaged at the grassroots level, right? When they finally get back to actions that pro-lifers can take in the political sphere, it's after having worked backwards from the goal with a theory of change so that the actions that we take are actually on a path towards achieving the goal. So CCBR's End the Killing Plan is a theory of change for the educational arm of the pro-life movement. Right? Working backwards from the goal, we realize we need to be able to make abortion unthinkable, to change hearts and minds so that people see abortion not as a human right, but they see it's an act of violence that kills an innocent human being. And they see that human rights only make sense when they're for all of us, not just some of us. They see that that abortion is not a human right, but it's a human rights violation. Right? We need to make abortion unthinkable. So, okay, what needs to happen if we're going to make abortion unthinkable in our culture? Well, we need to be able to reach everyone with abortion victim photography and apologetics, with that compelling evidence and those clear reasons, because that's what actually changes hearts and minds, right? And we need to be able to make the injustice impossible to ignore, right? We need to be efficient. We can't just settle on reaching some people. We need to have tactics and strategies that are actually going to reach everyone. The End the Killing Plan goes on further to say, well, what about gatekeepers who will try and stop the photo evidence of the injustice from being seen? Okay, well, we're going to need to route around gatekeepers if we're going to achieve our vision. The End the Killing Plan goes on to say, we should be able to try and change the minds of pro-lifers on strategy, but to focus on where we have support, right? So we make a case for why this is the most effective pro-life strategy. Like if someone convinces me that there is a more effective way to make abortion unthinkable, then I will drop this and do that, right? The reason that we're doing this is working backwards from the goal, asking what needs to happen. From all the evidence, from all the polling, from all the experience we've had, this is what seems necessary to change hearts and minds in the most efficient way, right? So we say we'll make that case to as many people as we can. That's why we do webinars like this or live streams like this. That's why we produce resources and training. But we're going to focus on where we have support, not where we don't. So to use Ryerson as an example again, we had a group of student activists at U of T. I was involved with U of T Students for Life, and we had a student at Ryerson, come to pro-life organizations active in Toronto, like CCBR and Toronto Right to Life, and say, I want to reach everyone on my campus with abortion victim photography and apologetics. And she was asking, not what can I do, right? Because there weren't many Ryerson students when we started out. There wasn't a team yet. If she asked what could I do, it wouldn't have been very much. But she asked what must be done. Well, we need to reach everyone. We need to make it impossible to ignore. Okay, well, what do we need? We need at least enough people to have an activism team to get out there once a week, right? We need the materials. We started working backwards from the goal to find those actions. So the End the Killing plan works backwards from the goal to establish what needs to be done if we're going to make abortion unthinkable in our culture. And the core points are to reach everyone with AVP and apologetics, not just to reach some people or lots of people. Lots of people isn't good enough. We need to be able to, in a meaningful sense, reach everyone with the truth about abortion if we're going to achieve our vision. That's what's necessary, and that's what needs to drive all of our actions. So all of CCBR's efforts are built around this kind of two-pronged goal, right? To be able to talk to everyone and to be able to show everyone the photo evidence of the injustice. Views of abortion victim photography and conversations about human rights apologetics are the two goals. So all of our projects are designed around this, right? We didn't just, I say we, most of CCBR's projects were designed before I joined staff. This is what attracted me to CCBR when I was active volunteering in Toronto here from the outside. This is why I got involved in running CCBR projects as a student and as a local community group leader. And this is what attracted me to join staff with CCBR, that all of CCBR's projects, you can tell they're not developed by asking, hey, what can we do? What kind of pro-life stuff can we do that might work? No, it's working backwards from the goal, asking what must be done. And working backwards from the goal, we identify we need views, we need people to see the photos, and we need conversations about human rights. We need to get the apologetics out there. We need to reach everyone. All of the projects are built around achieving this two-pronged goal, right? So at one end of the spectrum, we have our truth truck. We have a truck in Toronto and Calgary. We have a smaller box body vehicle that the Vancouver initiative has, right? So we get vehicles out on the street that can get tens of thousands of views, right? Or our roadside banner project in Ontario, where we can reach thousands and thousands of motorists during the rush hour commute. That's heavy on the views ends of thing. Now, you get to campus projects like the Abortion Awareness Project. We've run this in Canada, but we also lead a trip to Florida every February with a large display. I showed you some more of these signs earlier in the live stream, right? To get the views, to make the victims visible and impossible to ignore, and to have conversations with people. Or take our Choice Chain project, which works on campuses in front of high schools. It works on downtown, by subway stations, by major intersections, anywhere where there's pedestrians. This is kind of a midpoint balance between getting views of abortion victim photography and having conversations with people about human rights, being able to hand out pamphlets that contain the photos and the human rights message in them. There are high school presentations to different community groups as another way of reaching people with the truth. And then we go door to door with postcards to get the views, focused on quantity. But we also have the human rights message in writing, the apologetics in writing on the postcards, or to go door knocking and to focus on conversations, to focus on the apologetics. But we also carry the abortion victim photography with us, right? So all of CCBR's projects, we didn't just pick them, randomly off a menu, or didn't just, think about, hey, what kind of pro-life stuff can we do? They aren't developed by asking, what can we do? They're the fruit of asking, what must be done in order to achieve our vision, in order to make abortion unthinkable, in order to end the killing in Canada. And it doesn't just stop with our activism projects, right? A theory of change, this kind of thinking needs to permeate all of our efforts, all of our human efforts, I would say, but as pro-lifers, all of the efforts of our pro-life groups, right? So think about all of CCBR's other efforts? Where do our books fit in? Where do events fit in? Right? We don't just do these things at random either. They're an extension of our theory of change. If we are going to reach everyone with AVP, abortion victim photography, and apologetics, the human rights message, then, like, if we're going to educate our culture with AVP and apologetics, we need to educate pro-lifers on strategy and apologetics. So take the Toronto Pro-Life Crash Course. This is the photo from last summer when we didn't have to be physically distanced and could have a large group gathering of more than 5 or 10 in last July. We run this every summer. That's not a state of emergency. We're still trying to figure out what, if anything, we can do for the summer or the fall for the Toronto Pro-Life Crash Course this year. But in Toronto, we do this every summer. We had over 40 pro-lifers from across the province come to learn about strategy and apologetics and how to bring these projects into their community, how to end the killing. This is why we produce the resources, the books on strategy and abortion victim photography, or on the human rights apologetics, right? Or take our church study series, or the Toronto March for Life, or out west, our Calgary office was involved partnering with other pro-life organizations on a national pro-life conference back in November. I'm going to stop my slides here. You know, all of these efforts are not just random actions, or they're not just a product of asking what can we do. They're the fruit of asking what must be done, right? Because if we're going to be able to reach everybody with AVP and apologetics, if we're going to be able to have people in the major cities that CCBR has staff in, and people with community groups all over the country, reaching their communities, reaching everyone in their communities with AVP and apologetics, then we need to be able to train pro-lifers on strategy and apologetics. We need to provide resources and support in order to get the essential pro-life message out for effective education, to make abortion unthinkable, to end the killing, right? So you can think about, this is why I'm so thrilled to work for CCBR, and what has attracted me to make this my main focus, and to work with CCBR specifically in the educational arm. Everything that we do is in the service of that theory of change, right? So you can think about, where do other pro-life groups fit in, right? Like, why does CCBR support community groups who are running projects, right? It's not about our strategy. It's not about trying to get people connected with our organization. It's about trying to get pro-lifers equipped with effective educational tools and strategies, right? Titles and organizations and credit, that's not the point. I mean, this strategy isn't even ours, right? This strategy is adopted from successful social reform movements of the past, who changed the unchangeable by confronting a culture with an inconvenient truth, with the visual evidence of injustice, who were willing to endure persecution, who asked, what must be done? Not what can we do, but what must be done in order to achieve our vision, in order to bring an end to the injustice, right? So learning from successful social reform movements of the past, we put these strategies in place. We not only carry out these educational projects ourselves, or these activism projects, which are designed around reaching everyone with the essential message, but we've produced resources to activate and motivate other people to do the same, to join us to come do an internship, or come join our team in Florida, or during the Pro-Life Week of Action in Toronto, or come for the crash course, or, to come get training and join CCBR staff, or come get training and go back to your community and make sure that there's effective pro-life education going on your campus, in your city, in your town, in your school. All of the resources and all of the other events and projects are all built around this theory of change. I'll give you another example, which is activism in the pandemic right now, right? So we've had this theory of change. The End the Killing Plan was launched in 2011. An 18-year plan. But I don't think anybody anticipated the kind of global pandemic that we're facing this year, right? So we still know what needs to be done, but the particular actions we can take are limited by restrictions that we don't normally face. So the cool thing about theory of change thinking is it works, and it's necessary for the big picture, for achieving your vision. But it also works for any smaller piece of the problem, right? You can take any kind of interim goal, any other kind of barrier along the way, and theory of change it. Work backwards from the goal, ask what needs to be done, and figure it out. So CCBR has put a lot more effort into online live streams and webinars and social media outreach efforts in light of the public health restrictions during the pandemic. Working backwards from the goal, we know we need to reach everyone with AVP and apologetics. We know we need to train and mobilize pro-lifers. The ordinary ways in which we primarily do those have been limited over the last 3 months. So working backwards from the goal, still knowing what needs to be done. Okay, what needs to be done if we have restrictions on, holding events or trainings in person? Well, one of the moves is we shifted online. Or our team in Toronto, we've had the truck active for the last 3 months because that is a project that was easily in compliance with all of the public health measures and emergency orders. But we've just started to resume other activism in the city of Toronto as of today. Just earlier today, I'm still kind of sweaty because I was outside for a couple hours doing the first choice chain in 3 months. How do we figure out how to do activism, in this ongoing pandemic that's spanning out for months? Well, we theory of change it, right? We think, okay, well, we know what needs to be done. We know that we need to reach people with the truth, but we also know that we need to be safe. We have to care about the safety of our team and everybody that we reach. So we work backwards from the goal of getting back to activism as soon as it is reasonable and safe. To identify objectives, we need safety first. We need to make sure we're following all the laws and all the public health measures, all the emergency orders. We're not breaking any bylaws or any emergency orders. And we need to make sure that, our activities are reasonable, that we're exercising extra caution in the pandemic situation, especially in the city of Toronto, which is responsible for half of Ontario's cases of COVID-19. So working backwards from the goal of getting back out to activism, identifying, okay, what needs to happen? It needs to be safe. We need to be within our rights, and we need to be able to be confident that we're being cautious and careful and more modest and reasonable than other people or other activities that are allowable. And then from there, we can develop protocols about how we can do that safely, and we can get back to resuming activism. So that's an example of applying theory of change to a short-term problem that we've been facing recently. But this kind of thinking is so important for being effective in our efforts as human beings, and in particular, when it comes to the importance and the urgency of our pro-life efforts, when lives are on the line, when hundreds of children are being killed by abortion every day. It's essential that we don't settle for just doing something, that we don't settle for simply asking, Okay, what can I do? Or even, what kind of smart things can I do? Or what kind of effective things can I do? A better theory of action still isn't good enough. We need a theory of change. We need vision-driven thinking. We need to be able to work backwards from the goal to ask, what must be done to achieve our vision? And what's the prerequisite for that? And what's the prerequisite for that? And what's the prerequisite for that? And as we work our way backwards from the goal, then we will find the actions, not just that we can take, but that we need to take on a path towards our goal. And we can test and evaluate if it's working along the way. We can use this for all the small challenges and problems, the interim strategies and tactics that are needed, but also for the big picture of how we can make abortion unthinkable, of how we can bring about an end to the killing, this vision zero for the abortion rate in Canada. So if you're interested in more resources on effective pro-life strategy and the educational arm in particular, you can go to endthekilling.ca, and you can find resources there. Our pro-life classroom on strategy and apologetics. We will have our books available there soon. For now, you can find the books at thebridgehead.ca. If you're interested in some of our training webinars that we have, you can go to torontoagainstabortion.org/webinars, torontoagainstabortion.org/webinars, and sign up there. We're running a few a week, especially as we face restrictions on group gatherings in Ontario, and you don't have to be from Toronto or from Ontario to join those. And if you go to endthekilling.ca and go to the blog, you'll see a blog post from about a month ago that I wrote on, I think it was 7 different ways to get active even during the pandemic. And there's links and specific suggestions in there. So check out the blog on endthekilling.ca and my post on how to get active if you want to get involved or get more involved. But yeah, it's essential that we have vision-driven thinking. And I often think of a line that Cardinal Collins is fond of using here in Toronto. He says, "I'm of the opinion that God has placed our heads in such a prominent place on our bodies so that we would use them," right? It's essential that we have courage and dedication and commitment to the cause. But we also need to do everything within our ability to make sure that we are doing the smartest and most effective things, that we aren't wasting time or resources on less efficient or less effective efforts because lives are on the line. And that means we need a theory of change. We need to be able to work backwards from the goal so that we can take actions that we know are necessary to achieve our vision and to bring about an end to the killing in Canada. And if you want to learn more about that End the Killing plan, the theory of change for changing hearts and minds in abortion in Canada, endthekilling.ca. Thank you, everybody. I don't see any questions in the comments or anything, so I think I will leave it here for the live stream. But if you have a question, you haven't typed it yet, or if you are watching this later, I will try to keep an eye on the comments in case anybody has any thoughts or questions or suggestions or anything. But thanks for tuning in, and endthekilling.ca for more information on how to get involved and how to get active with our theory of change to bring about an end to the killing and end abortion in Canada. Thanks.